Do you have a stack of watercolor backgrounds or maybe alcohol ink backgrounds? Put those to good use and try tangling them. Learn these simple Zentangle patterns and how to use them on your cards. Welcome to a new color connection with Amber, where I use the color scheme from the Altenew Inspiration Challenge. To enter the challenge, follow the link in the description below, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe and like. I have a stack of watercolor backgrounds, but I'll show you how to make your own. Here I have the Watercolor Brush Markers in Autumn Festival and Spring Garden. And if you missed my watercolor showdown, I'll link that in the top right hand corner. It compares brush markers, watercolor pencils, and pans. Here I have Sea Breeze, Ultramarine, and Rubellite, and this goes well with our inspiration color scheme. And I'll also add Ruby Red later in the video. The fine liner pen set is light fast and waterproof ink, so we'll definitely be using those today. And I have 2 pieces of watercolor paper cut to 4 1/4 by 3 inches. I have 2 jars of water, one for cleaning the brush and one to pick up clean, clear water, and a palette. So I'm going to start off with the Mountain Mist watercolor brush marker, and I'm going to put ink directly onto my glass mat. I'll also drop in some turquoise because I want a variance of color. And I'll just mix those together a little bit, and then I want to drop, not my brush, I didn't intend to do that. I wanted to drop turquoise or Mountain Mist into the middle of this to get a little more variance of color. I'm not worried about dropping my brush on the paper because I'm going to ink smush this anyway. So I'm going to take the watercolor paper and smush it directly into that ink. Now, I didn't spritz the ink with water after I dropped in the Mountain Mist because I wanted those kind of like separated pools. There you can see I didn't clean my brush after I dropped it. So I'll pick up a little bit of the Ruby Red, a little bit of the Rubellite so that it's a little darker. And then I want to ink smush those roughly around those same 3 splotches that I already have. So when I'm creating watercolor backgrounds specifically for Zentangle, I like to have a lot of white space on the project. And typically what I do is I will tangle on the painted areas, but not always. You'll see 2 variances of this in today's video. Of course, we have to have some splatter, so we'll go ahead and add that. And that's a Mountain Mist and turquoise mixture up there in the right-hand corner. And I'll add a little bit of turquoise splatter, and this will be done. Now, of course, you want to let your panels completely dry before you tangle on them. Otherwise, your pens could bleed. And here's the other panel that I've already created. Here's the Altenew fine liner pen set. This is a really well-rounded set. It has pretty much everything that I need in order to tangle. So there's 4 different sizes. The ink is archival, light fast, and waterproof. So it's great for your watercolor projects and to paint over it. So there is a brush marker, so that has a brush nib. You can do lettering with that. You can fill in areas with a lot more ink faster with that. Then there's an 02, an 01, and a 005 as well. I'll start my tangling with the 01 and then switch to different pens as needed. When I approach a watercolor background, I let the shape of the watercolors decide which tangle pattern I'm going to be using. For this card, I'll be using Flux Echo, which was designed by Lynn Mead. I'll have a link to the source of the pattern down below in case you want more information. I'll create 3 of these on this card, so you'll get to see this a couple times. And after I show this one, I'll switch to a side view so that you can see the pen on the paper more clearly. As for any fine liner that has a nib similar to these, you want to use light pressure. You do not want to push firmly on the pen nib. It will start to retrude the nib. The nib will start to push back into the barrel, and you'll get less use out of your pens. So really gentle pressure. If you want a thicker stroke, then I would suggest using one of the thicker pens. So here you can see the pattern up close. You basically start with a circle, and then you have these upside down tear shapes that grow off of each other. They echo. You echo the original shape. In this piece, I'm only drawing where there is watercolor pigment on the paper. And so for some of the strokes, I will fill it in the white space because is easier to read. The eye is it's easier for the eye to complete the shape with that extra stroke. But for the most part, you can see that I stop drawing when I hit the white area and then pick up that same line again once I get to the watercolor pigment. Here you can see this pattern looks really incomplete and I've run out of watercolor. So I'm just going to complete this shape. So there's no hard and fast rules in Zentangle. Well, there are some, but even those I don't always follow. I am a certified Zentangle teacher. And if you are more interested in adding Zentangles to your cards, I have a class on Altenew Academy called Zentangle for Card Makers that shows you how to incorporate Zentangle patterns into your stamp designs. So if you're interested in that, I'll either have it linked up below in the right-hand corner or down below in the description. So look for that there if you haven't taken that class already. If you have taken that class, thank you and welcome back. I know it's been a hot minute since I've shared Zentangle with Altenew. Here what I'm doing is adding weight to the lines. So the key to any, I think, art project is having contrast. So these little, we'll call them flowers, or fans, they look pretty boring without weighted lines. So I'm just adding some extra ink and darkness where the two petals, if you will, meet up at the top. This is going to add more visual interest and contrast to the design. So it's really important to weight your lines or have these dark areas in your composition. Just like with card making, for me, I love to design with black and I like to add those areas of black in there, whether it's black splatter or a black mat around it. Any kind of black that you can add, I think just adds more visual interest and contrast. So here I have the brush pen, and if you press down on this, you're going to get a thicker line. If you lift up, you'll have a super thin line, you guys. And I'll slow this down so you can see, because I start to change my approach. So here you can see I'm barely touching the paper. You'll see it more here. And I'm kind of just skipping over the paper to create these broken lines. That has more visual interest than the thick line in this case, because I felt like the thick line was causing a little bit of confusion in the areas where the petals were more narrow. So this little skipped line is a lot more effective in this case. So I'll add a little bit of that to the centers here. And then it's time for shading. So shading is what makes your Zentangle patterns come to life. Right now they look really cool and you could stop here, but I'll add some highlight and some shading and you'll get to see that. Make sure that your pencils are sharp. Now normally, this is a longer pencil, so it's a little harder to hold parallel, but when you're using your white charcoal or when you're using your pencil, what I recommend is holding the pencil more horizontal to the page so that you're using the side of the pencil versus the tip. This is going to give you a broader stroke with your graphite and it's going to be easier to blend. You won't have any harsh edges. Here I'm using a paper stump to blend out that graphite, and you want to be careful to keep it close to the line. You don't want to extend your graphite too far into the design. Otherwise, the piece is just going to look dirty instead of having a shadow. So I'm going to darken up this shadow here. So I've slowed this down so you can see it a little bit more. Now, I'm not holding my pencil parallel, but I am careful to use the soft part, like when your pencil gets worn down and you have more of a soft part versus that sharp edge. I'm using that soft, flat part of the pencil right now. And I'm just adding more graphite. And when I'm using my tortillon, typically I'll put the tip of the tortillon towards the pen line that's on the paper and I'll draw the graphite out. Now here, I need to turn my card in order to get that same technique. So I'm putting the tip of the tortillon and even the pencil towards the line of ink. And I'll just draw that out. So here's how we look. And look at the difference between the shaded ones and the non-shaded ones. Huge, significant difference there. So I've gone ahead and shaded the rest of them. And here I have a sentiment from Many Delight Petite Posy. Anytime I'm looking for a small sentiment, I look to my mini stamp sets because they have perfectly sized sentiments for these small spaces. And I just think that has such a cool look, and we didn't have to do any coloring, just shading. Here's the finished card and a little preview of the next design we're going to do. I also added a piece of washi tape, and I'll show you that at the end. I just wanted to show you the finished card now. For the next card, I'll be using the pattern Jokey by Kim Aerts. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I still have the 01 fine liner, and I started off with just a small pencil line, which I only do once more and then don't do for the rest of the card. And again, I'll zoom in on this so you can see it better. You start with a swirl pattern, and then you echo the back end of that line. So I'm going to add another little edge for me here. So I started with a swirl, and then you just echo that line, and you kind of stair step it down so that it gets smaller and smaller. So here it is close up. So the swirl, and then you echo the back end of it. And I'll show you this several times. I recommend varying the direction of your swirl so that your echo lines will go off in either direction. And here I meant to go the other direction, but I went the wrong direction. So I'll just add another one over here to fill in that watercolor pigment. So you can see I just kind of put them on top of each other. It's always fun when you vary the size of them too. So make small ones, make large ones. I did that same thing on the first card. It just adds a lot more visual interest when you vary the direction, vary the size. And I'll shade those echoed lines as well, and that will create a segmented look to this pattern. So it'll add definition between each one of those segments. If you've been following me either here or over at Notable Ink, then you know that I shade a lot of my watercolor paintings, a lot of my Copic coloring. This is where that comes from. It comes from Zentangle, and this is how I kind of started doing all of that shading. Now, I felt like this pattern needed a little something more, so I'm adding a pattern called Tipple, which is really just small little orbs, just drawing some circles, kind of packed tightly into each other. And if there are any small, tiny little spaces, I'll fill those in with black. This is another way to add some contrast and visual interest. So I use those a lot. Just like with our last pattern, this pattern looks best with some weighted lines. So I'm weighting the lines around the swirls in the center, and also some of the lines in between each of the segments. Here I have a white charcoal pencil, and I'm adding some highlights. Now, this is really effective because we have the watercolor background. If you were to try to use this on just the white paper, you really wouldn't be able to see it, but because we have the watercolor pigment, it's very noticeable. I'm going to use the same sentiment for this card as well. And because it's watercolor paper, you do want to stamp it twice, so I recommend using a MISTI. And here are the two panels together. Let's take a closer look. So totally different look. You can see in the one on the left, I didn't tangle all of the pigmented areas. I left some of that just open. I can't believe I used this tape again, you guys. So this tape is coming soon. This is a sneak peek. I don't know why I thought this is already released. It is not, but it is coming really soon. So keep your eye out for it. But basically, I wanted these small stripes to go directly through the center of my sentiment. And so I just lined that up so that would be the case. I'll fold this around the back, and then I'll pop up the two card panels on sticky back fun foam to give it a little bit of dimension. Here's the Jokey pattern card, and I love how there's more watercolor brush marker on this card that's not tangled so that you can see all that texture. I love how it picks up the texture of the paper. Here's our first card with the Flux Echo pattern, and I love the clusters of these little blooms and how they take the shape and take their form from the watercolor brush marker. I hope you guys enjoyed these projects today. If you are interested in learning more about Zentangle, then check out my Altenew Academy class, Zentangle for Card Makers, and visit me over on my blog, notableink.com as well. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you soon with more inspiration.
Hello crafters, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching!